have one more story that I do want to cover. Russell Brand actually, believe it or not, interviewed Ron DeSantis. Now, I actually was kind of surprised that Ron DeSantis went on to independent media. But granted, he did do the Twitter space, I think maybe things are starting to change a little bit in reference to presidential candidates and choosing to be a part of independent platforms. But the section of the interview I want to focus on tonight is whether or not Ron DeSantis can beat Donald Trump. And I want you to hear what he has to say. I do have disagreement, but I want you to hear what he has to say. And then also, it was brought to my attention. Apparently, Ron DeSantis was in a car accident today. Interesting timing, don't you think? Let's go ahead and get into it. Here is Russell Brand here with Ron DeSantis.
In the chat, what you think of this conversation. How do you, in your position, knowing that there is no pathway to the presidency via Donald Trump, that this is a phenomena and a fact that you're going to have to deal with, how do you confront his position in the polls? And what would you do about some of the charges that Donald Trump is facing in the event that you were president? And also, how does it personally feel as, like just talking to you for a while, and clearly you and I would see a whole host of issues very differently, but it's pretty clear that you're a pretty potent political voice and figure and orator. How do you deal with the sort of wild card of Donald Trump and what he represents to so many people?
Well, look, this is a campaign that's still very early on. Most people are not paying attention over the summer. They're doing things like be with their families and they're enjoying themselves. So
yeah, it is earlier on and people are doing things with their family over the summer, but that still doesn't explain why you keep decreasing in the polls next to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump continues to increase against Ron DeSantis every week. So what it does mean is that the people who are paying attention don't want you. Ron DeBoring.
We've been laying the groundworks in the early states. The media will talk about polls, but they'll take a poll from the whole country. That's not how the primary process works. You do Iowa, then New Hampshire, then South Carolina. So we're actually on the ground in those states doing the work that is not always kind of headline grabbing, but it's really grassroots, and we're building support. So we're doing a good job. We're going to continue to do more. I think at the end of the day, looking forward, our voters, they want to win. And so we need to beat Biden. I will beat Biden. And then they want somebody that's actually going to be able to deliver on all the things that we care about. And you and I have talked about some of the issues. We also have the border. We also have a whole bunch of other things. And I have a record in Florida. When I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. I'm not just out there doing idle promises. I know how many people run for office. They overpromise and underdeliver. Well, I think.
But right now, he's talking about his record in Florida. But right now, Donald Trump is beating him in Florida. I can't make this up. Right now, Donald Trump is beating him in Florida in reference to Republican voters. We covered this a couple days ago. So maybe the things that you got done in Florida, Ron DeSantis, people aren't too happy about. Let's continue. Let's listen to the torture dome.
I'm going to do something. I do it. I'm not just out there doing idle promises. I know how many people run for office. They overpromise and underdeliver. Well, I think I'm one of the few where I made bold promises, no doubt, but I overdelivered on the promise. And part of the reason I do it is because I'm a former military officer, so I'm disciplined. I
might not want to get into that conversation. For those who don't know, we talked about one time before on this show about his involvement in Guantanamo Bay when he was a JAG officer and how he not only supported torture, but encouraged it. So Abby Martin has done a really good job investigating that particular story. So when he starts talking about like how he was in the military, I'm like, might not want to get into that conversation. Oh man.
Don't give the other side a lot of rope to hang me with. I'm not shooting myself in the foot. I'm focusing on the task at hand. I'm focused, I'm disciplined, and it's all about accomplishing the mission. And I think our voters are in a situation where increasingly they're saying, that's what we have to do. Also, the way the United States is with the 2-term limit for president, Trump would be a 1-term lame duck. I could serve 2 terms. So I'm in my 40s. I would go in on day one. I'd be incredibly energetic. I would be very active. You want to talk about the administrative state?
He will be energetic and very active. Is that the impression that you get from Ron DeSantis, that he's energetic and active? I don't get that impression. He comes across as boring to me. He doesn't come across as charismatic. Like, honestly, it's just, I'm thinking about some of the professors that I had when I was in undergrad, and there were some of them that were like energetic and really engaging with the class. And then there were some of them that the moment they start talking, I'm ready to take a nap. And I don't see, no, I don't see no energy. I don't see any engagement, Ron.
We would be able to slay the administrative state. We'd secure the border. We'd do all these things, and it would really be a flurry of activity. So more and more people are going to see that. We haven't even had debates yet. And just keep an eye on those early states, because I like what I'm seeing there. It's a little bit different on the ground than some of the stuff that gets put out on some of the national stuff.
How do you manage the tension when there is a plain appetite in your country for anti-establishment figures? RFK becoming an emergent force in the Democrat Party, Trump having been the defining figure in the last 5, 6, 7 years in American politics and American campaigns. How do you deal with managing the tension of being a representative of establishment forces while acknowledging that many people no longer trust the media, many people no longer trust the government, many people are deeply cynical about American institutions? How do you deal with the massive mistrust and near-nihilism of American cultural life? Can we imagine a situation where whatever the result of the next presidential election, the opposing side will likely say the election was stolen, it was because of Russians, it was because of broken or corrupt voting machines? How can you ever bring together and justify a centralized American experiment, particularly when you seem to believe so strongly in decentralization, federalism, and maximum democracy? How do you deal with this mistrust and this great appetite for outsiders?
Well, one, I would push back on this idea that I'm representing establishment forces. I get attacked by the corporate press more than anybody running for office, more than
BS. He gets attacked by the corporate press more than RFK Jr. is attacked, more than Cornel West is attacked. Let's remember what Tucker Carlson revealed, right, when he left Fox News, that Rupert Murdoch had already decided that this time around, Fox News was going to support Ron DeSantis. They were not going to go with Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis has corporate backing, whether it's the Fox News network through Rupert Murdoch, or whether it's through someone like David Sachs, who also heavily supports Ron DeSantis. People who have held fundraisers for Ron DeSantis. Here he is already lying. You're not even on the real campaign trail yet. You're not on the debate stage, and he's already lying to you. And we're going to expose this, because this is BS. He is 100% corporate, and people really need to take this in. He is lying. Jeez Louise. You don't have to worry about me with corporate backing. Bull crap.
Well, one, I would push back on this idea that I'm representing establishment forces. I get attacked by the corporate press more than anybody running for office, more than Joe Biden, and now more than Donald Trump, because I think the corporate press views me as a bigger threat.
He mentioned 2 people that are running for office and said he's getting attacked the most. He didn't mention RFK. He didn't mention Cornel West. He didn't mention anybody else that's running for office. You see how that worked? All he had to do was just say, let me mention the main people.
I understand that I will beat Biden, and they know I will actually deliver on all these things. Whereas I think they think that Trump would not beat Biden. And then I think they think even if he did, that he would be distracted with all these other stuff and wouldn't be able to deliver. So I've been the target of all these people. And I think it's because I've been willing to lead. Also, I would point out during COVID, I was the one fighting Fauci. Donald Trump
We got to skip this part. Sorry. I do remember that part. That is true, but we got to skip it because of YouTube. Sorry, guys. Leaders of the world. Misrepresentation. And
we're getting answers for that. So I think I present a great opportunity for people because I have all the right enemies. You see it by how they're attacking me, but I also have a proven record of beating these people, and we would do the same thing as president.
Thank you, Rob.
no, we don't see it by the people attacking him, because I don't think a lot of people are even paying attention to him. Like, this is what I'm sorry, but I don't think a lot of people are paying attention. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's very revealing. Let's go on a little bit further here because a sponsorship comes in and I just don't want to, I don't like playing the sponsorship stuff because I'm not trying to sponsor anything. Here we go.
As long as enough people use the link. Two of the most powerful voices in the space that you currently occupy, Governor, have to be regarded as Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson. Both of them have taken strong, overt, explicit anti-war stances, saying, among other things, that the Pentagon can't pass an audit, the money that American taxpayers are funneling into this Ukraine war that increasingly seems like a disaster and a proxy war ought be immediately ended, that a peaceful solution ought immediately be sought. As a former military officer, where do you stand on this conflict, and are you willing to match that kind of anti-war rhetoric? And how do you reconcile the enormous revenue, the vast budgetary and treasury weight that this war and the military-industrial complex places on the American people generally, with the conditions that many former military personnel are enduring, many of them having to use food banks, many of them, like a significant number, ending up homeless? A great stain on American culture, I would say, is the rhetoric that supports veterans and the shameful way in which they are treated. What is your stance on this current conflict, and would you end this war?
Let me just pause here for a second, because this was the moment when I realized I don't think that Russell Brand knew about his military past, about his, involvement as in Guantanamo Bay, about his position as a JAG officer, about how he actually feels about torture. I have this feeling that maybe he didn't know about that, because this is where I think if I am bringing up the anti-war issue, I'm going to bring up that. I'm going to mention, well, what is it with the stories that I've heard about you at Guantanamo Bay? And the reason why I say that is because Ron DeSantis does not like to talk about that. He doesn't speak much about his time at Guantanamo Bay. He doesn't speak much about, his position as a JAG officer and his time there. And I think this is something that, should be pushed a little bit more, but let's go.
So one, on the military industrial complex, we are actually going to overhaul how these retired generals are allowed to then just go work for defense contractors. As commander in chief, you can put restrictions on that. You basically have a revolving door where people go from high military positions into just a handful of major defense contractors. We're also going to democratize the ability of people, because we obviously need to have a strong defense, but we don't want it to go to just a handful of companies. We used to have all these companies like during World War II. So we want to do that for sure. And we absolutely need an accounting to just do a blank check. That doesn't serve the American people. And when I was in Iraq, the thing that I noticed was, and this was 2007, So we were there fighting Al Anbar province, Al Qaeda in Iraq. I was attached to Navy SEAL Team 1, and the mission was very murky. Yeah, beat Al Qaeda, but then create a democracy in the Middle East and Iraq. Well, we weren't able to do that. And so you ended up being there for many years. There was a lot of money spent. There was no clear-cut victory. Same with Afghanistan. And I think what's happening in Ukraine is they're barreling towards a multi-year stalemate where a lot more people are going to die, where you're going to have a lot of treasure that's going to be spent for basically no change in outcome. And so what I've said is we need to focus on achieving a sustainable peace in Europe. We should not want to see this thing go on. We have
I'm sorry.
pressing problems.
I have to pause. I was going to let him finish his statement, but I have to pause here and interrupt. He has flip-flopped on his position in reference to Ukraine. At one point, he did support the blank check that was going out to Ukraine. When he started to realize that Trump had a different position in reference to that war, and that was more popular, particularly with his base, then he changed his position. So I did want to tell people this, like, don't buy into this crap that Ron DeSantis is saying here. I don't believe this 1 minute. I don't believe that he's against the blank check. I believe he's still very much a war hawk. I don't buy it. I don't believe anything coming out of his mouth. When I look at this man's face, I see the word liar. I just see it. But he's talking around all of this rhetoric, this position. In other words, no, he is not anti-war, and he's not going to be anti-war. He may have criticisms with the amount of money that was spent. He may have criticisms with the length of time that American soldiers spent in other countries trying to implement some type of regime change. Doesn't mean he's against regime change. So we have to pay attention to the things that he's saying and the question that he was just asked. The very first thing that came out of not Ron DeSantis, very first thing that came out of Russell Brand's mouth was the anti-war position. And he doesn't want to say that because he's not anti-war. That's just is what it is. All this other little small talk, I got some issues with the money that was spent. You know, we were over there in Iraq for so long and da-da-da. We got to do something about that. We got to get the corporate money out. Now, I just told you that he's already tied to corporations. He's already approved by Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News, a billionaire. He's already had fundraisers by people like David Sachs, another billionaire. So he is tied to corporations. And here he is trying to tell the people, well, we need to get the corporations, out of the military involvement. That's bullshit. You're already attached to the corporate money and corporate interest. Let's go back a little bit and we'll let him finish. This guy's such a fraud.
Well, we weren't able to do that. And so you ended up being there for many years. There was a lot of money spent. There was no clear-cut victory. Same with Afghanistan. And I think what's happening in Ukraine is they're barreling towards a multi-year stalemate where a lot more people are going to die, where you're going to have a lot of treasure that's going to be spent for basically no change in outcome. And so what I've said is we need to focus on achieving a sustainable peace in Europe. We should not want to see this thing go on. We have pressing problems at home that we're neglecting, as you mentioned, our own veterans. We have an open border in the United States of America. We have American families that are losing children to fentanyl overdose by the tens of thousands because we haven't secured our own border. And yet we've sent how many hundreds of billions of dollars there? They're not sending that to us. Also,
he got that talking point from other people. He was not saying that stuff before. He got that talking point from other people.
So I do think we have threats in this world, such as the Chinese Communist Party. What you've seen is the amount of ammunition and the amount of weapons that have been sent to the Ukraine has actually dwindled our own stocks so that if we were potentially in a major conflict, we would not be able to respond. Now, Donald.
That doesn't make any sense. What is he talking about? It dwindles our own stock. They continue to make the weapons. These companies didn't go out of business. Raytheon didn't go out of business. These companies, they continue to make the weapons. What is he talking about? That takes away from our own stock and we're not going to be prepared. What? Listen to the China part, because I'm trying to show you what he says here doesn't make any sense. Let me get to the China part here. Okay, right here.
Losing children to fentanyl overdose by the tens of thousands because we haven't secured our own border. And yet what? We've sent how many hundreds of billions of dollars there? They're not sending that to us. Also, I do think we have threats in this world, such as the Chinese Communist Party, which you've seen as the amount of ammunition and the amount of.
So he says we have threats, which is the Chinese Communist Party, but he doesn't say what the threat is with China. That's the piece I think is very telling. He doesn't tell you, okay, what is the threat with China? He just goes on to say we're giving all these weapons to Ukraine and that takes away our stocks and prevents us from being unprepared. Unprepared for what? What is the threat with China that he's talking about? He doesn't say. I'll tell you what the threat is. It's economic. It's the fact that China has most of the top 10 banks in the world. That was not always the case. Think about that. The US government wasn't thinking about that when they decided to send jobs overseas to China. Economic.
Of weapons that have been sent to the Ukraine has actually dwindled our own stocks so that if we were potentially in a major conflict, we would not be able to respond. Now, Donald Trump, had made different comments. The other day, he said he wanted to flood Zelensky with weapons. So I'm not exactly sure, where he is on that. But I think the goal needs to be no blank check and have a sustainable peace in Europe. It doesn't serve our interest.
That's actually not exactly what Trump said. What Trump said was that he would call for peace. He would end it on day one. And they said, well, what happens if, Putin doesn't want to back down? He said, then he would make the threat that we're going to flood Ukraine with the weapons as a way to push him to agree to peace. But Ron DeSantis left that part out. Oh, my God.
To be involved in this thing infinitum.
Join us every day for Stay Free with Russell Brand. If you like this video,
I don't know how Russell Brand got through that interview because that one was a rough one for me. But look, long story short, he is corporate. He was lying to you guys. He lied to Russell Brand. This guy is very much captured by billionaire money as well. He's not going to be any different. Just case in point. Would Fox News back him if they thought that he was going to be different? Let's see the poll results. What did you guys think? Do you believe that Ron DeSantis will beat Donald Trump? 1,040 votes. 3% of you said yes. 87% said no. And 10% said that you are not sure. Well, I don't know if Ron DeSantis will see this, but you might want to look at this poll. You might want to look at this poll. That does not look good for you. Does not look good. Okay. Thank you so much, Eric. Terry says, de-Satan the boring candidate. He's boring, right? Miguel says he's the slimmer version of Chris Christie. Why you go there, Miguel? Why you do that? Why did you do that? That's messed up. Thank you for the super chat. Cool Blue. A question for Ron DeSantis. Is he politically in tune with where this country and its people are at? And does he sense the direction we need to go in? I don't think he really does.